Whew, oh my god. Remember in my last video how I said my goal was to upload every 2 weeks? What a joke that turned out to be. I went to Arizona, caught COVID there, and now it's 4 weeks later and I am fucking sorry for everything. I also tried to record some stuff with a green screen, but that turned out to be horrifying, so I'm going to try that again at a later date, but for this one, we're going to keep it old school. When you boot up a game for the first time, your first impression can come from a lot of different places. It could be the opening cutscene, your character, the first boss, the setting, or even the music. For me, the strongest first impression that I have ever had, though, has been from good old Skyrim. I remember booting it up on my 360 for the first time on a shitty little TV on top of my bookcase, and I got lost in that game on Christmas evening until like 4 a.m. The opening tutorial sequence was neat and I was immediately enamored with the setting, but the real first impression for me came when I first exited that tunnel with Rayloff, which I have done every time since then. Eat shit, Hadvar, and the bright sunlight reflecting off of the mountains hit my eyes, the sounds of the cold mountain air poured out of my little speakers and raised the hairs on the back of my neck. Rayloff told me it was best if we split up, so I wandered off and popped open my map, and there it was. The first look at Skyrim in its entirety. I peered at everything, trying to soak it all in, and I was stuck in disbelief that I could go anywhere that I could see. The swirling clouds and mists of the Reach made me want to sprint for the mountains as fast as I could, but then wait, there's another whole portion of the world down here? Hot springs and craggy terrain faded into yellow birch trees, and because I was a wood elf, I knew that I had to go there first, because it was the closest thing to Lothlorien. I forgot the main quest entirely, which is a shame, because the first time I heard Strongar say, "Nord nonsense! Why you puffed up ignorant?" I absolutely fell in love with the Nords. But my point here is, opening the world map and seeing how incredible and expansive Skyrim was made me want to explore it all immediately. Fuck everything else.
I need to see it!
The urge to go and discover these places marked on my map overpowered the drive to finish missions, find loot, or even level my character. That map was the reason I immediately got hooked on the game. To continue on with first impressions though, I know that the feeling of wanting to explore doesn't always have to come from, it usually doesn't even come from a map. Take Dark Souls, for example. You can immediately see where you want to go, but getting there is the hard part. In the third game, for example, you can see the second to last boss fight as soon as you get to Lothric for the first time. You can see Archdragon Peak from Irithyll and Anor Londo, you can see the Cathedral of the Deep from the Undead Settlement, and so on. In a more linear game, you can physically mold the environment to force players into a specific line of sight to tell them, look, that's that shit that you need to go to. Right there. Hey, no, there. Now shoot. But without that kind of structure and guidance built into a game, you need something to help you find your way. Let's start with the big boys. We've already briefly touched on Skyrim, but there are a few other things that really make this one work. The first of which is that angle. Most of the other maps in this category are a top-down bird's eye view, laid out like a real-life, old-timey, just ancient, crusty, like 1992 Road Atlas map. Skyrim was the first game that I'd ever played where your viewpoint is set back, allowing the map to be shown in 3D. Now we all know that Skyrim is the shit. It's a staple in video game history to the point that it's a bit of a shock to find out that someone who's into video games hasn't ever played it. And as I said, I firmly believe that the biggest pull of the game is exploration. The quests are all pretty fun, except for the main one with fucking Delphine going like, "Oh, you want to rent the attic room? Now we gotta go talk to Esbern," and then you find Esbern and he just goes, "Go away!" It's ugh. But a huge part to every quest is making your way to the quest location, and that's why this map kicks ass. Games that use a top-down map system either mark quests for you and show you the quickest route, or they show you each path marked and highlighted for you to plan your voyage. But that's not really an option when the map looks like this. Say you're playing the first bit of the game and you need to go from Whiterun to Ivarstead to find the base of the 7,000 steps. Looking at the map, you might take off on the main road towards Svalheim Towers or double back through Riverwood towards Helgen. Those are the main roads anyways, so those would be the easiest paths. Some stubborn folk would spam jump all the way up the throat of the world, but it's pretty much impassable and very much a waste of your time. But if you look on the map and you stare at the mountain real close, you may say, huh, that looks like a passable spot just past the Whiterun Stormcloak camp. And lo and behold, a small trail with boot prints snaking up right under High Hrothgar. It leads you on a cold, quiet little trek that offers you a great view of the springs in Eastmarch and the golden birches of the Rift. It drops you out at a small pond right across from Iverstead. It's an amazing shortcut, free of enemies and ambushes, and it gets you there much quicker than the other two routes, but it's only available to you if you look for it. Or for free, now that I've just told you. You're welcome. I will gladly take your subscription as payment. But the whole point is, that trail and many others like it aren't marked on the map. They're there for you to find so that you feel like you're actually forging your own path. The Witcher 3 does this to some extent, but everything that's majorly important has a distinct path with very little that you can actually discover. At least until you get to some of the smaller islands of Skellige. The Witcher 3 also introduces a problem that I have with a lot of open world maps. I'm not entirely sure on the specifics, but after you've been gallivanting around one of the areas of the world for a decent amount of time, all of the locations become visible on your map. Admittedly, they all appear as question marks initially, but I think it still detracts from the experience of finding things organically on your own, especially when we focus on Skellige again. When you see the ocean littered in question marks, it doesn't make you go, oh boy, new treasures and adventures, because you know that all it's gonna be is this. Without question marks there would be a point to sailing the high seas, looking for loot from sunken ships and pirate buoys. But when they're clearly labeled, it turns into a sort of checklist, and to me, feels like a chore. That same feeling has popped up in a lot of open world games though, and in some ways I feel like the intention is to make sure that you always have something to do, so that you can flick open the map and choose what kind of event or challenge you want to pick from and head over to it. But that to me just feels like garbage. We can take a look at the map for Rage 2 here. And yeah, this is the menu if you haven't ever seen it. The rest of the game is, worse. Most of the important locations on the map are marked again with question marks, and most of them are all near the roads. So when you're driving through the world, you uncover a ton of stuff. Then once you reach your destination, you just look back at the bandit hideouts and sentries, and you know, for certain, that they're all gonna feel exactly the same. Which brings me to the games that made me want to make this entire video. The Far Cry games were my first encounter with what I'm just gonna call the Watchtower Map Mechanic. Reach a tower, climb it, activate it, and it clears a portion of your map, revealing important locations and other fun tiddlywinks. There are 3 franchises that use this method that I want to talk about, one of them obviously being Far Cry. I have to use Far Cry 4 because I can't boot up Far Cry 3 thanks to stupid-ass, shit-ass Uplay telling me that they can't authenticate my game that I bought on Steam thanks to their useless third-party bullshit. And the other 2 are Horizon Zero Dawn and Breath of the Wild. Now, in Far Cry, everything is uncovered when you clear a watchtower. I'm talking rare collectibles, vehicles, animals, individual loot chests, and more. And it honestly just feels awful. There's no, oh look at that building over there, I wonder if it has loot or a propaganda poster to tear down. Because you can literally just flick open the map and see if it's worth checking out or not. But this is sadly necessary because of how this game works. The game is heavily focused around the main story, so I think the idea behind throwing all of this in your face is to make you go, well, I'm right next to this loot chest, why not grab it? Now I'm next to this one, and now I'm right next to blah 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 and so on and so on. If the icons weren't there to show you where the good shit was, would you even bother exploring in Far Cry? You can't just find powerful new weapons and armor, the loot isn't like that. There's no real reason, no real pull to go and yank propaganda posters down or walk over some loot to find out that it's actual garbage. So putting loot icons straight in your face, right on the map, helps a little bit to push you towards certain spots, to guide you away from the main story for just a second so that you don't steamroll the entire thing and then end up feeling like you didn't get your money's worth. But what ends up happening with this is that every time you unlock a new area, you get the cutscene showing you more of the same kind of location, another fucking bandit outpost, more posters, all of this shit that covers your map that you need to go and clean up. In a word, it's tedious. Imagine if you had to reach a shrine in each hold in Skyrim, and when you did, every location was uncovered. It would feel more like, good lord, look at everything I have to do, rather than happening upon a new location and feeling like, oh sick, look at this new thing that I get to do. It's obviously apples to oranges to compare some whatever Far Cry location to one of the Skyrim dungeons, but I still think that happening upon a new area makes you more eager to dive into it rather than just having it immediately highlighted on your map. Unlocking areas in Far Cry just doesn't feel great because by the 4th or 5th one, you realize that it just turns into a grind. But somehow, Guerrilla Games managed to work around that. Horizon Zero Dawn was published by Ubisoft, and I admit within the first hour of playing the game I was groaning a little bit because the Far Cry Ubisoft formula is baked into the foundations of this game. Collect colored herbs to craft consumables, hunt specific animals that inhabit specific zones to upgrade your gear, destroy the alarms and bandit camps which you can find by looking for smoke columns in the air, unlock the map by climbing shit and activating the top. There's a lot that's taken straight from the Ubisoft playbook, but there's more than enough cool shit in this game to make it feel totally original and incredibly fun. The map itself is gorgeous. It's top down like most of the others, but it's also in 3D. I'm not sure on the exact specifics, but I think the map is slightly curved so that when you pass over high peaks like this, you can literally see it pass from right to left. It's almost like a tilt shift in a way. The point is, it's cute. And even though you do unlock the map through the Watchtower mechanic, that was changed and freshened up to be more engaging and impactful. Each tall neck walks a different path, which forces you to figure out a way to maneuver through enemy-infested territory and jump onto its neck. Each one is also in a different biome, so unlocking a new portion of the map means you're unlocking an entirely new environment, something that the Far Cry games really lack. And if you want to see where the collectibles and other points of interest are on the map in Horizon Zero Dawn, you need to find a merchant who sells the map of the specific thing you're looking for. It isn't just given to you when you download the data from the Tallnecks, you still need to figure out where to buy the treasure maps and get the resources to purchase them. This not only gives you the option to go out and freely explore without any hints to find loot and rares, it also gives context to the icons showing up and ends up feeling more like something you worked to uncover rather than something that was thrown at you as busy work. Alright, so this is where I was going to talk about Breath of the Wild for a second, but I don't have a capture card. So I went onto YouTube to look for some footage for this game, and I found this video by Jason Kwan, and he goes over all of the points that I was going to make in amazing detail. It's super well written, so I don't want to step on any toes, and it's kind of pointless to restate what's already been perfectly said. So if you want more info or a good look in depth at the Breath of the Wild map, that's your guy. But I think a good thing to look at now would be how the Watchtower mechanic came to be in the first place. So let's look back at classic games for a moment. One of the most exciting things and driving forces behind any game is unlocking new zones or areas. In older games, you would literally finish an area and move on to the next one, with each area being completely isolated from the others. But as things transitioned and games progressed to a more open-world setting, how are people supposed to keep getting excited about new places? There's one game that stands out to me as a sort of transitional point in open-world map design, and ooh baby, I think I can hear it coming. Good thing my language already ruined my monetization because...
Hey yo, Jim, man, why don't you kick some of that, you know?
Good God, what a classic. Need for Speed Underground 2 was, if memory serves correctly, the first game that I'd ever played that was even close to an open world. For those of you who haven't played it, it works like this. You start in the city center where the first races are. As you progress, roadblocks are cleared and new areas are uncovered. New races pop up in the new zones and you get to speed in there to find new tracks, new shops, and new little secrets. But one of the beautiful things is that the entire map is available for you to look at and ponder from the moment you start playing. Nothing's obscured and nothing's hidden. See, this kind of map, this kind of mechanic, I think is a transitional point from games with segmented levels to a true open world. With this game, you're still confined to a certain area. Everything in that area is tuned to be around your current skill level, and you need to clear all of the challenges in that area before moving on to the next. That's straight up Mario. But instead of saying, yay, you beat the city center, now you get to pause, scroll over, and load into Jackson Heights, you get to drive there at your leisure, which allows you to experience the world in greater detail. This is where I think the Watchtower mechanic comes from. You get the feeling of unlocking a new area without getting interrupted by an end of level screen. There's no break in the action. So instead of blocking off parts of the physical world, game developers just started obscuring the map. But with the Watchtower mechanic, shouldn't it just feel like you're unlocking a new area the second that you walk into a new biome? Why do you have to unlock the Watchtower for it to really feel like you've unlocked something or uncovered it? It's because of the map. It's because of that information being withheld from you. One of the things that Jason mentioned in his video was the way that Breath of the Wild withheld information from the player. By taking away guidance from a player, it forces them to pay closer attention to the world around them. If you've ever played the Galactic Adventures expansion pack from Spore, which I also made a video on, which is also worth a watch, you may have seen this method being employed by different creators. In this expansion pack, you're basically making your own games for people to play, right? And one of the design options available to you is deciding whether or not to have the player's objectives shown to them in the mission log and on the map. So if you want the player to go to the apothecary, you can either have the game guide them there, or have them talk to someone who says something like, "Why yes, the apothecary is the building with a red roof. It has lovely pine trees out front. You can't miss it." And then you trust that they'll be able to find it that way. When people do this, the difficulty of the adventure spikes up significantly. This whole expansion pack is what taught me to even start paying attention to how maps in games were handled in the first place. I learned that a game's difficulty is largely derived from the amount of guidance and information that's given to you. So with that in mind, we can look at the last few games that I wanted to talk about. We've mainly gone over open world games, and it's because they're the obvious frontrunners when we're talking about maps. If your game is more linear, just moving from point A to B, there's no point in giving your player a map, and so a lot of those games don't have them. Imagine if you were playing Dishonored, and you had the option to pull up a map for each zone, and you would sit there looking at your map instead of moving your ass and trying different approaches. One of my all-time favorite, more linear games is Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and in that game the map feels a little unnecessary. Do you really need a map to remember where you've been? There's like 5 fucking buildings. I only ever open the map to make sure I've combed everything for loot. If the map wasn't there, players who didn't naturally poke their noses into every little crevice might miss out on a lot of gear because they wouldn't have the map to tell them where they haven't checked. And those who did manage to find everything on their own would then be rewarded for their efforts. If we look at Jedi Fallen Order, we see another linear game, but this one absolutely benefits from having detailed maps available to the player. There's a sort of necessity for a map here, because the game involves a lot of backtracking and revisiting, so guidance is very much needed. This is how the map on Zepho looks after your first visit, and this is how it looks when you've fully completed the planet. It's a maze. So this, to me, feels like a unique situation, where this map, this beautiful 3D hologram sexy little thing, was a great choice. It's kind of like Lordran, but with more side routes and passages. It's got a lot more webbing, where you can wind up somewhere else instead of mainly a few elevators that tie it all together. This map shows you how to get where you need to be with almost nothing else revealed to the player. You don't really get objective markers, you mainly look for places that you can manipulate with the Force, because that's usually the way forward. For instance, once you unlock Force Push, several spots will be highlighted that show that they're weak walls that can be pushed down. Having them shown to you on the map, to me, doesn't feel like handholding. It just feels useful. Mainly because I thought back to Dark Souls 3, where I missed the entirety of the Smoldering Lake because I didn't climb down the bridge. And how hard I rolled my eyes when I realized that to get to Archdragon Peak, you had to use this specific emote next to a suit of armor with next to no hints towards that. So when I do have a map now that nudges me towards the new things I can unlock after reaching milestones, I'm stoked. Fallen Order is one of the only non-open world games that I can think of with an incredibly useful map like this. Most games that have relatively confined or linear levels typically challenge the player by making them remember where they've been and making a mental map on their own. I know I haven't gotten to every kind of map in existence, but I think I've gotten my point across. And I was gonna make some argumentative statement like maps that show the entire world without offering an overabundance of information are the best, but that just kind of boils down to personal preference. I know that not everybody is the same kind of gamer. I mean, shit, there are people who unironically play Madden. But I do think that it's interesting and fun to take note of when developers do want to give you help and when they don't. And I do hope that in the future, we see games giving the players less information so that we can discover things on our own. I hope you enjoyed the video. Turned out to be way longer than I had hoped for, but if you did stick around to the end, thank you very much. I would, of course, appreciate your subscription. I've got a lot more video ideas in the old noggin, and hopefully we'll get some green screen stuff rolling soon. And if this video offered you a spritz of serotonin, I would also love if you left a like. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.